So today we're going to get back to our regular series about attributes of God, or what is God like. Today our topic is God is unchanging. That means that he is the same always. And for the last about 38 weeks, we've been talking about all the different things we know about God. That God is almighty, that God is all-knowing, that he is powerful, that he loves you. And all the things that we have learned about God are always the same. That means from the beginning of time, all through history, all the way in the future, everything about God will always be the same. Okay, so if we're talking about ourselves, we change all the time, don't we? I know that I don't look the same as I did when I was 5 years old or 5 days old, or even the same as when I was 20 years old. I've changed. I look different, my voice sounds different, I think different things, I know different things. A lot of things have changed about me. And even you kiddos, even if you're only 5 years old, I know that you have changed a lot in those 5 years, right? You know, when you were a baby, all you did was just cry and try and get attention to get what you needed. Maybe you needed a bottle, maybe you needed your diaper changed. You didn't know how to communicate that, right? So you're really different now. Now if you want something, you just ask your mom, can I have a juice box? Or, hey, can I go outside to play? So we have changed a lot. Let's think about other things that change. Did you know that a butterfly doesn't start out looking like a butterfly? It starts out as a caterpillar. It spends a little bit of time being a caterpillar, and it crawls around and it eats leaves, and then it makes itself a little chrysalis or a cocoon. And then after a little bit of time in the cocoon, it comes out and it looks like a butterfly. So it's gone through a whole transformation. You wouldn't even know that they were related when you see what a caterpillar looks like and then you see a fully formed butterfly. Or think about an oak tree. Did you know that an oak tree can be several hundred years old? But they don't start out as an oak tree. They start out as a little tiny acorn. And then they sprout a little leaf, and then they grow bigger and bigger, and before you know it, you have a mighty oak tree that is hundreds of years old. They are constantly changing. Today we're going to read a story that comes from the book of Luke. It's about a guy named Zacchaeus. Now, Zacchaeus had a job that made people really hate him. He was a tax collector. You may have heard your parents or some other grown-ups complaining about taxes, like, I have to pay so much taxes. Okay, so Zacchaeus was a tax collector, meaning that he would go around, knock on your door and say, you owe $10 for taxes, or you owe $15, or you owe $100 for taxes. But even worse than just being a tax collector, he was a bit of a crook. He was stealing taxes. He was taking more than he was even supposed to take. So pretend that you owe me $10 and I come and knock on the door and say, hey, give me $20 for taxes. And you say, oh no, I only owe $10. Well, Zacchaeus would say, give me $20 or I'm gonna take you to jail. That's pretty bad, right? So Zacchaeus started out as someone who really loved money. He loved being powerful. He loved taking money from people. He wasn't a very good guy, so he was actually pretty hated because people didn't like tax collectors anyways, because no one really wanted to have to give their money for taxes. But even worse than that, he was a bit of a crook, so people didn't like him anyway. He had a bad reputation. So let's see what happens with Zacchaeus. So Jesus came to town and he was walking down the street. Now at this point in the Bible, Jesus was already pretty famous. When he was coming to town, people would come out like he was a celebrity. Oh, I want to hear what Jesus has to say, or I want to talk to Jesus, or I'm sick and I want Jesus to heal me. Everyone was pushing through crowds trying to see Jesus. He was very popular right then. So the thing about Zacchaeus, he was a pretty short guy. So imagine if you've been like at a parade or a crowd and you're trying to look over all the tall grown-ups and you can't see anything. Sometimes your dad might pick you up and put you on his shoulders, or someone bigger might hold you up. because you can't see. That's pretty much the problem that Zacchaeus had. He could not see over all the taller people. So he had a pretty good idea. He climbed up in a tree so that he could see Jesus coming. He wanted to see Jesus. He had never met Jesus before, but he wanted to see who this special guy was. So Zacchaeus climbs up in the tree and he's looking out over the crowd as Jesus is coming through, walking down the street. When Jesus sees him, he calls out his name. He says, "Zacchaeus, come down from the tree because today I'm going to go with you to your house and eat." That's pretty crazy, right? Because Jesus had never met Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus didn't know Jesus and Jesus didn't know Zacchaeus. But yet he knew his name and he called him out and he said, "I'm going to go to your house today and eat with you." So there were a lot of people who did not like Jesus and they liked to gossip and talk bad about him. So they said, "Oh, Jesus is going to the house of a bad guy. He's going to hang out with a guy like Zacchaeus. I would never hang out with a guy like Zacchaeus." So they were judging him and they were saying bad things about Jesus. "Oh, look at him, the gross people that he hangs out with." But Jesus didn't care what people thought. Jesus went with Zacchaeus to his home. And upon meeting Jesus, Zacchaeus was changed. Okay, so remember that I told you that God and Jesus are unchanging. They do not change. But we do change, don't we? And I told you that Zacchaeus was a bad guy. He was a crook. He was a guy who took things that didn't belong to him. He was a guy who liked money, who liked power. But when he spent time with Jesus, he invited Jesus into his house. He had a desire for Jesus. They sat together, they ate at his house, and Zacchaeus was changed by this. He told Jesus that he would pay back everyone he had stolen money from, and he would even give more. So if he had stolen $10 from you, he was going to give you $20 back because he wanted to be different. He saw how good Jesus was, and he was changed by that. And so changed from the inside in his heart, and he changed in his actions. So he said, "No longer am I going to steal from people. And if anyone I've stolen from, I'm going to go back and pay them extra, more than what I stole from them." So who changed in this story? Did Jesus change? No. Even though people were judging him, saying, "Oh, Jesus is hanging out with bad guys, with crooks, with tax collectors. Zacchaeus is the worst. I would never hang out with him." Did Jesus change his behavior because of what people said? No. You know what Jesus said? He said, "I came to save what was lost." So in this story, what was lost? Zacchaeus was lost. Zacchaeus was lost in sin because he was doing bad things. He was living for what he wanted. He wanted to have power. He wanted to have lots of money. And he was pretty good at it, right? He was powerful and he had lots of money. But Jesus came to save him from that, to save him from his sin. So Jesus didn't change in this story. Let's look at Zacchaeus. Did Zacchaeus change? He started out the story as a tax collector who just cared about power and money. And then by the end of the story, he's saying that he wants to bless the poor, that he wants to give back everything he's taken. He is a new man. So that is the crazy thing about Jesus and God. Not only do they never change, but they also have the power to change us. Just like we change from when we're a baby to when we're a grown-up, we change in our hearts too. So if we were to just do everything that we wanted, we would be like a baby or a toddler, like, "I want that toy, I want some candy, give me this, give me that," because that's how our hearts are, kind of yucky, just naturally on our own. But when Jesus comes into our life, when God comes into our life, it gives us a desire to change, just like Zacchaeus. He didn't want to be that yucky person anymore who was stealing money from people. He didn't want to be sinful and living for the things that he wanted. He wanted to be changed by Jesus. And that is the power that Jesus has in our lives to make a real change in our hearts that also shows on the outside. Okay, so we actually have two different verses that I want to look at today. One is from Malachi 3:6. It says, "For I am the Lord, I do not change." And the second one is from Hebrews. Hebrews 13:8 says, "Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever." So everything we've learned about God and Jesus will always be true. He will always love you. He will always be compassionate toward you. He will always be all-powerful, all-knowing. He always is able to control every situation that you're in. He is above all things. Those things do not change. That feels good for me to know that I can depend on God, that I can depend on Jesus because he will always be the same. Even though I have changed, I have in some ways gotten better because I've tried to fix some yucky things in my heart or the way that I speak or the way I behave, not because of how good I am or how nice I am, but because Jesus has come into my life and given me that ability and that desire to change. So I can change, but I know that Jesus and God will always be the same. And then I want you to think about your own life. Just like Zacchaeus, right away, he knew what his problem was. He knew that he had an issue with loving money, with loving power, and he says, I'm going to change it. If you know that you have something yucky in your heart, ask Jesus to help you change it. So you change on the inside and it shows on the outside.